What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to another episode of the NATO versus Warsaw Pact group build. We are back on the bench with our Su-15 and I am super excited about today's episode because I get to go ahead and do a little bit more scratch building. And I love scratch building. It's so much fun. Last episode, we went ahead and pushed forward there. We got the rear tail all set up. We've got that ready to go on. We have our front insert we want to go ahead and install today as well. So we have a lot of little bits and pieces to work on. Let's get started. First thing I want to go ahead and tackle is the wheel well here on the front nose. We need to go ahead and re-scribe a couple of panel lines. We had to cover up a lot of seams with some super glue, so that is mostly sanded. We do have to come back and do a little bit more work there. We've got a couple of areas I want to add in a bit more sanding, but we need to go ahead and re-scribe a couple of these very large panel lines. Re-scribing is something that I'm not really that adept at. For anybody who's interested in my method, I use a double-ended pin vise. I've got a small sewing needle in one side and a smaller awl in the other side. Just use that Dymo tape, draw out the lines, and scribe them out. Not that difficult, but a little time-consuming, and it can be kind of tedious. Now we're going to go ahead and switch over to some sandpaper. I want to sandpaper down all the panel lines I've now scribed, come back in with my jeweler files, make sure that we don't have any of the seams from last episode. And I think we're looking pretty decent with all of the inserts here. And that's the problem with inserts. Once you start putting in all these extra parts and pieces, inevitably you have to re-scribe a bunch of lines because the insert goes through the panels. It can just be a mess. So I don't like it when companies do this. So as modelers, it's just half the fun, just making it work. On the very top of the fuselage, I want to go ahead and glue in this insert. And this is going to be one of those instances where I need to come back a little later with some super glue and really fill in all of these lines. So we're going to start off first here with gluing down the top part with some extra thin Tamiya cement. Once this is all dry, we'll cover everything with some super glue. That should prepare us then to come back, sand it down, and to make sure that we have all the panel lines taken care of. Let's get going. I like how that has turned out so far. We do have to do a lot of sanding though to make sure that we don't have any of those seams that aren't supposed to be there. We might have to re-scribe a couple of panel lines and maybe some access panels as well, but it looks okay for what it is. Now we're going to actually move over to some of the scratch building again on the wheel wells. So this should be a lot of fun. So starting off here, we're going to create some of these small boxes that sit up inside the wheel well. Now there's one on each side, and I'm actually pulling an old part off of my FJ2 Fury, and we're modifying that so that it looks about right. Again, we could have just stacked a bunch of styrene together, glued it down, and then shaped the box to fit. But I always like to go back to the spares box to reuse some of these parts that I just have no use for. And I have a lot of spares, so I really like to go ahead and hit that first. If I can't find anything that works, then I'll go ahead and I'll make my own out of styrene or something to that effect. So with one box made, nicely sanded down, let's go ahead and test fit it and see where it will sit here in the fuselage. And that goes right about there. So you can kind of see what I'm looking at. Now my references show that there are wires that feed from the back end of the wheel well all the way into this box. And then there are wires that come out of the front of that box and then go into the front part of the wheel well. So I'm going to try to recreate that the best I can. I want to give enough room in the front so that we can fit some wires in there. Again, this isn't going to be perfect. Nothing on this kit is actually very accurate. So I'm not too concerned about it being a little misshapen or maybe not quite 100% accurate. I'm good with it. Let's just go ahead and push forward, glue these down. We need to make one more exactly the same, which I have a part ready to go. Let's get that done. Couple of swipes of the jeweler file, we've clipped off that little box here, and I'm going to glue that down right in the front of this. That's one of the nice things about having spares. You know, you can just find one that fits, and if you happen to have two of those same parts, you can just use the exact same method on the second part, create what you want. That's why I like to hold on to all of my spares. It's just easier in the long run, I find. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this down right where it's supposed to be, so it's equal in both size and shape and location to the other side, so it matches. And then we're going to go ahead and start threading in some wire. We've got 0.3mm solder. I've got my references open on my little computer next to me, so we should have a good idea of how many wires go in. So let's go ahead and cue up that time lapse, push through, and again, we're just adding some wires. We're taking a little bit of some super glue on my homemade applicator, dotting down the end of the wire so we'll stay put. Then we're just going to bend it as necessary and feed it to where we want it to go. So let's get this going. All right, everybody. So that was a lot of fun. I think it looks decent. It's not perfect. Like I said, nothing on this kit is perfect, so I'm happy with it. We're going to go ahead and move on to the very front windscreen. Now this is going to be a little bit more complicated. If we look at the references, we see there's a lot of action that goes on right underneath that front windscreen on all the Su-15s, so both the A and the TM. So we want to go ahead and add in some extra parts up there to get this looking a little bit more accurate. And it's not going to be 100% accurate, but we're going to have something there. So again, we need to go back to our spares box, find parts and pieces that will be adaptable to this front windscreen area, and add in some boxes and add in some wires. As long as I don't stack it up too high in the very front, kind of taper it up from the front to the back of the windscreen, I think we'll be okay. So let's go ahead and put this away for safekeeping. I don't want to scuff or scratch that. And let's see what we can find. So on any Su-15 cockpit, one of the main focal points has always been that giant radar scope that hangs right there in the middle of the instrument panel. What we're going to do here is I'm going to take the kit part, which is not the greatest. We're going to clean it up, drill it out to make it look like it has a little bit of depth to it. And we're going to test fit and see how that works. Now in the model, they just have you install that and nothing else. But in reality, there's a lot of boxes and wires. I'm not sure what they all do, but I know there's more stuff up there than what we're given here in the kit. So what we're going to start off with is this radar scope. Now this thing fits down on top of the underside of the windscreen, and it hangs down right in the middle of that instrument panel. There's a little bit of a notch cut out, so it fits in decently. I'm going to have to do a little bit more sanding and whatnot to make sure that it fits down nice and flush where it needs to be, but that's about the idea. And once I get this positioned, then we can go ahead and figure out what boxes and wires we need to put to the right and the left of that to make it look a little bit more realistic. And this right here is about where that scope should go. But we have a lot more parts we need to go ahead and add. So I went ahead and I hit the spares box again and I pulled out a bunch of different plastic pieces. They range from simple things like gears or maybe actuators of some sort to more complex things. I'm not even sure half of what these things are, but it doesn't really matter because we're going to go ahead and repurpose them to look a little bit closer to adding in some detail there on that front windscreen. So this should be a lot of fun, and I always enjoy doing this. Now, I also was able to find a gun sight that came off of an old Focke-Wulf kit, and we might be able to use this for, I'm not sure if it's a gun sight, but there's something that hangs down the very bottom of that windscreen. So we might be able to use that and create something that looks close to what it should be in real life. We're just going to go ahead and jump into a time lapse. I'm going to add in wires and add in parts and pieces. Just have fun with it. It's not going to be accurate, but let's go ahead and be creative and go with the flow. All right, everybody, we are back, and I really like how this has turned out. Using the different boxes and the different shapes and whatnot that I pulled out of all the different parts there in my spares box, I think it looks better than it did for sure. I also added 2 holes there in the very top, strung in some wire. I like how it looks, and I think it's going to look really awesome when we go ahead and paint it. Not sure what colors to paint it yet, but we'll do some research and we'll figure that out. Now, test fitting the front windscreen, we can see that everything fits in very nicely. We have enough view down there so we can see the action, we can see all the parts and pieces, we can see the wiring. So that's what I was going for, and I think we nailed it. Now again, not accurate, guys, so don't worry about that. But having something there looks a lot better than having nothing there. Now, I had mentioned the idea of gluing on the front nose to go ahead and get the fuselage more or less completed. And that's fine and all, but I don't really want to go ahead and do that quite yet. I was thinking about it, and I'm not sure how tail heavy this is going to be. So until I get the rear end on, until I figure out how the aircraft sits on its landing gears, I don't want to glue this down just yet. So I'm going to wait. I might want to go ahead and fill this with some sort of weight so that it's not a tail dragger. Turning over back to the wheel wells, I really like how the scratch building has turned out. I didn't do anything too crazy. Like I said, I just used a couple of reference photos that I found. We kept it minimal. We did add a couple of extra little wires here and there, and I think it looks pretty decent. We will have an actuator that comes up off of that and attaches into the outer gear bay door, but we don't have that installed quite yet, and that gear bay door I've heard actually isn't even very accurate, so we might do some custom work on that. But we are looking decent, guys. I like how this has all turned out. We've got the wings nicely attached, and I did take a little bit of time and drop in some Mr. Surfacer, smooth those out so that we don't have any gaps between the fuselage and the wings. We've got the top insert on there. We've got all the super glue nice and cured. We've got the scratch building in the wheel wells, so that is awesome. We also have the scratch building in the very front of the windscreen, so that I really like. And of course, we've got the insert glued down, and we have our super glue covering up all those seams. We have a lot of sanding left to do though. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do next episode. I want to come back in, sand all these seams down, file them out, re-scribe a couple of panel lines, and see where we go from there. So until our next episode, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool, and we will see you back here on the next episode of the NATO versus Warsaw Pact group build. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.